Welcome back to Personalist Manifestos. My name is Michael Morelli, and I'm the host of this ongoing conversation about contemplative revolution. There is a lot of talk about immigration these days, but Isaac Samuel Villegas, a pastor and author of the book Migrant God, does more than talk about immigration. He lives his life in a way that takes seriously what Jesus tells us in the Gospels. The Incarnate Word of God is not only with the migrant, he is the migrant in our midst. So Isaac speaks, writes, and acts with a prophetic and pastoral mixture of realism and hope. And in this episode, we talk about Isaac's book and the stories in theology that shape it. And just a warning, there is a loud fire bell that goes off right at the end of this episode. Don't get startled by it, especially if you're driving on a highway. And so with that, here's my conversation with Isaac. Welcome to Personalist Manifestos, Isaac. How you doing today?
Good, Michael. Thanks so much for having me. Excited for this conversation.
Me as well. As we always start on the show, what do people need to know about Isaac? Who is Isaac?
I mean, you don't need to know very much about me. Not
Yeah.
that very, but I'm a child of Latin American immigrants. Grew up in Los Angeles, California, born there, and then also Tucson, Arizona. We moved when I was a kid with a factory. My dad is a factory worker, and they moved the factory from LA to Tucson. So I grew up basically in the borderlands, the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. I was a pastor for 16 years here in North Carolina. Moved out here to go to seminary and stuck around to be a pastor, Mennonite pastor. And currently in a doctoral program. Took a break from the pastoring bit to read some theology. And I also coach high school soccer. I'm a JV high school coach.
Wow. Okay, you are a man of many interests and talents. So lots of questions I could ask here. But top of the list is, who's your favorite football club?
Ooh,
Like soccer team?
I know. Yeah. Well, I hear you. So I don't, it's hard to know how these things happen, but like as a kid, my favorite team was Liverpool.
Okay.
And I just feel like I can't shake that. So at the end of the day, there was a time there where I was like rooting for Manchester United, but that felt like a little bit of a bandwagon. So I go for Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, Manchester United is one of those teams where they're easy to cheer for because they're a really good team. It's like cheering for the Yankees, It's like everybody likes the Yankees. They're the Yankees. But
Right.
Yeah, Liverpool. So I come from an Arsenal family.
Oh, yeah.
And it really started with my dad just liking the Canon logo as a kid. And then from there, it just grew, and it's sort of like been passed down. My middle brother is a super, super fan. And I'm more just like, well, this is the club my family cheers for. And it is kind of like cheering for the Canucks, the Vancouver Canucks. You keep getting your hopes up and then dashed, but Arsenal's is doing well right now, so that's good. But we're true believers when it's going well and when it's going bad. One thing I'll say about this, I love Liverpool's tagline, "You'll never walk alone."
Oh yeah, I know. Isn't that the best?
So good. It's so good.
Come on now, that's what I want in my life.
Yeah, I know. It's so good, and even rival teams will acknowledge that line and the song that they sing is legendary. Like, you have to take your hat off to that, even the bitterest rival. So, yeah, I love it. It's so funny, actually, like being a theology podcast, the amount of conversations that start around sport is really interesting. Yeah. Anyway,
in my mind, like I think of, all the ways so I grew up playing soccer too.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like my vision of Christianity is so much shaped by soccer and like being a team player and the discipline of practice, learning what it means to be a team and how sometimes you make sacrifices for I don't know. It just feels like soccer and Christianity kind of came together at the same time for me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I, being Canadian, I grew up playing hockey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also played soccer myself. My dad played soccer for one of the University of British Columbia soccer team. So, grew up playing soccer as an East Vancouver kid. So, yeah, that was kind of just natural. And, my dad was like, here's how you really play. I was like 7 years old and I'm slide tackling kids, I was like,
Nice.
you're gonna play the Italian way, rough and whatever. But yeah, no, like I totally agree with you. And it actually one of the things that I like about hockey and soccer and rugby, I played
Oh,
rugby a
nice.
little bit in high school, is the flow of the game.
Mm.
I really struggle with games that stop and start too much. I like the intuitive nature of like, okay, we have plans, we have strategies, right? We have lineups and so on. But there's an unpredictability to a game that's not stopping and starting as much that I just love and I think is so reflective of human life. But yeah, also the teamwork aspect and the discipline, hopefully the integrity, these sorts of things. I mean, it really comes down to formation, right? It's about how does playing a sport or dedicating yourself to any type of discipline, sport, creativity, whatever, form you not just for that discipline but for life.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the other thing, thinking about it, how it's formed me, and not just Christianity, but maybe politics as well, is team sports, soccer being the one that I'm most familiar with, but like what it means to lose together as well. Like I remember, I mean, I'm still coaching soccer now, but like losing, oh, it's the worst. And then you have to like shake the other team's hand and being like, you know what? We have to leave it all out of here on the field. We lost, and this really sucks. But we can at least say, hey, you were the better team, or maybe you weren't the better team, but you're scoring more goals, and let's get on with this. But yeah, what it's like to lose together and to go on. I mean, that is the story of the left in our world today. And so I think I've prepared myself for losing again and again and again by playing soccer.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to talk about what it means to be Christian, what does it look like to lose together?
Yeah.
And of course, the most profound losses may seem like losses from the sort of worldly perspective, right? But actually this brings us like to the foot of the cross, like the
Hmm.
place of the most evident apparent loss, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Is also the place, strangely, of triumph and overcoming. But you can't rush to the triumph and overcoming. You actually have to wrestle with the very real loss. Like there were
Hmm.
people at the cross and people who ditched Jesus
Yep.
because they were scared that they were next, but they're both of them are like, we thought this was the Messiah, we thought this was the guy, and we just lost all of that, right? And there's 3 days of that before the triumph. So yeah, it's learning to lose well, I suppose. I feel like you could write an article on that, or at
Yeah.
least a whole book on this. But
And even in the losing to, sorry, keep on going on
no,
this.
no, let's go. I'll
Even in
go
the
there.
losing, like there's the beauty of the game too. I
Yes,
mean, soccer, like, you develop plays. I can think back on games where, my team lost, but there was just moments where just like, you know what, everything felt right for a little bit. Like that series of plays was just absolutely perfect and beautiful, even though we lost. So, even recognizing in life, like when things don't go right and when you actually lose, like there's still some beauty to it.
for sure. I remember reading something about the film Friday Night Lights. Now it
Oh yeah.
became a TV show, but I remember uh great movie, and they asked the people who made the film, why did, like, the next year that team went on to win state. So why did you pick the year that they lost? And like,
Ooh, good
because it's more
question.
interesting. It's a better story. And it is a great story, right? So yeah. Well, maybe we'll just, co-author an article or book on
Yeah.
losing.
On lose. I mean, you're the host here, but a good segue to the book is
Yeah,
what does it mean to lose into this immigration struggle? I mean, that's the world right now.
yeah.
My
Oh, for
goodness.
sure. Yeah, and I wanted to say that, we had talked before the Christmas break about scheduling this time to interview, and I always find it so fascinating how timelines work. Like it's happened a number of other times where I've like scheduled interviews in advance, and then in the lead up to that interview or me posting it, something happens and the theme links up so well with what I scheduled before it happened. And so with this particular interview, with everything going on in the States with immigration, um,
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not like it's a new thing, but just
Right.
with the particular news cycle and what's getting attention, I was like, wow, it's amazing how you schedule something, then all of a sudden the spirit is just like, here, I'm just going to give you this.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, let's talk about this book you've written, and also to a bit of the journey towards writing this book and being a pastor, but the type of pastor who was very involved in caring for immigrants and for the rights of immigrants and just acknowledgement of their basic personhood, and then of course connecting that to theology or like the Christian story. And I'm going to take a leap of faith and assume that this is an area that you're also looking at in your doctoral work.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Definitely.
sure.
Yeah.
So I want to hear about, yes, the book, but I also want
hmm
to hear about the journey towards the book and the work that you've done and are doing, because I always find it so rich to hear about how people ended up in ministry,
hmm
doing theology, and then doing the sorts of things that you're doing. It's never a sort of one size fits all story.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. This is one of these things where to write a book and it enters into the world, and then the author, you have to think about like, yeah, where did it come from? Because sometimes it just happens. But there's definitely parts of my own story that, looking back, are certainly important in how it all came together. But yeah, I mean, I grew up, like I said, the child of immigrants in Los Angeles, and like immigration wasn't even like a conversation point because it was just what we were. You know what I mean? Like it's just the air we breathe, the water we swim in. It was just our lives. My particular situation there was it was mostly Central American community. My mom's from Costa Rica. This is kind of where we landed, um, or where she landed, and yeah. So it didn't really become a point of something that I thought of as like an object that I could even name separate from me, because it was just part of who I was until I became a pastor. I was out here in North Carolina, and being a pastor, you care for the people at church, you care for your neighbors, you care for your community. It's like God's calling on our lives, and I was like, yeah, this is becoming worse and worse for undocumented neighbors. I'm a U.S. citizen, so I don't I have documentation, but like I also just can't help but think of my own parents' story um, as akin to those other stories. So yeah, that's how it became significant to me. Is like we got to care for our neighbors. This is what it means to be a pastor. This is what it means to be a church. This country doesn't care about our undocumented neighbors. We got to figure out what this means in terms of ministry. So yeah, so it was both like family stuff, probably made me attuned in ways that like I didn't pay attention to until I became a pastor. And I was like, oh, this is just what it means to be like to live out the gospel. We love our neighbors. We don't ask them their documentation status.
Yeah. And were people receptive to that
Yeah.
generally? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in my congregation, yeah, I mean, for sure, yes. I mean, it's were Mennonites, and um, part of what it means to be a Christian is to live out the way of Jesus. Like that's just kind of central what it means to worship, to gather, and this understanding of living out the way of Jesus as caring for neighbors without discrimination is just part of our way of life. So I would say that it never felt like it was an uphill battle. That's not to say there wasn't a lot of discernment and Bible study and all of that that went along with our commitments, but it wasn't within my congregation. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And people were and are immigrants in our congregation too. So it's not like immigrants are out there. It's like part of our body.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've observed with Mennonite folks, so where I am in Vancouver, there are actually, especially in sort of, there's the Vancouver area, and then there's different cities. There's Abbotsford and Langley, where I live, and Burnaby and Coquitlam, and all these different cities. But in Abbotsford, there's actually a lot of Mennonite folks, and so a lot of Mennonite churches. And the school that I work at, I mean, I work at a Baptist affiliated school, but we also partner with a Mennonite school
Hmm.
and other schools. And I do a lot of work in the area of disability, the church, and ministry, and so on. And it is really interesting just trying to form connections with churches, and honestly, how hard it can be to form connections with churches. And we have found that Mennonite churches are actually some of the most open
Hmm.
to saying, yeah, sure, like we actually see the need for this, and we need to be doing more in this area, or come talk to this, leadership team, this board, or whatever. And I do think that there is this sort of, if you look at the history of Mennonites and, persecution and just like migrancy within the Mennonite story, right? With
Hmm.
specifically Ukrainian, German, and so on. Um, and that's largely the Mennonite populations we have here. Yeah, it's kind of baked into the story. So it's not like it's a novel insight. It's more
Hmm.
like, well, yeah, this is a part of who we are, and we can point to all the different places in the Bible that show us that, like, if we're talking about what it means to be the people of God, this is actually what it means to be the people of God. But if you don't come from a context or a tradition like that,
Hmm.
then it can seem these days like a bit of a tougher sell.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And along with like you're saying, the migration patterns that form Mennonites, which, I mean, let's just be honest, this is also the case for the church in general too. It's not like Mennonites are unique. It's just
Yeah.
uh, traditions that acknowledge the fact that um, the Christian movement was one that started in the backwaters of Judea, and then moved into Greece, which is like a not it was a significant place at the time, but then Paul just had this vision. He's like, I got to keep on going to the ends of the earth to spread this gospel. And then here we are. So yeah, so that migration has been part of all of our stories. And I mean, the other thing, like, I guess theologically to think through in terms of the Mennonite tradition, Anabaptism, that has just gone hand in glove with care for neighbors, is that like the care for the neighbors part in terms of the Anabaptist tradition is not like an accessory that you add on to the real thing, which is like faith in Jesus. Like it's part of it. You faith in Jesus is lived out. Like there's this important passage from a 16th century Anabaptist, Hans Denk, who says, "To know Christ is to follow him daily in life." It's in our hymnal. It's in our Mennonite hymnal as like a responsive reading. It's like to know Christ is to follow him daily in life. It's like you don't know God by reading the Bible and praying and going to church, and then take that knowledge to your ethics so you can live it out. It's like it's all enmeshed in one another. We know Christ as we follow him daily in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, reading your book, I was reminded of some key passages. And I mean, right from Genesis 4, right after Cain murders his brother and tries to, shirk the guilt by asking that that question, on my brother's keeper. And I know this comes up in your book too. God's like, yeah, and the consequences of Cain's actions is that he's supposed to be a wanderer on earth. He doesn't do that. He settles down and builds a city. And it always blows students' minds where I'm like, hey, this is what the Bible says about the origins of civilization. It's like, what?
Yes.
I thought cities were great. And it's like, well, kind of, because we're going to like an eternal city, a new heavens, new earth, but what kind of city? But actually you're like, the city, according to scripture, is founded on murder and
Mm,
violence and disobedience. And the Israelite people, it would make sense that they would ascribe that to a city, because it's like anytime the Israelites are going to a big city, it's often because of slavery. And then Jesus comes along and actually fulfills what Cain couldn't, right?
mm,
Saying, foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. I mean, Matthew 25, saying that he is the widow, the orphan, the sojourner. It's just all there. And even the two greatest commandments, love God, love your neighbors yourself, they're holistic in the way
hmm
that you're talking about. So, um, yeah, it really is baked into the bread of Genesis to Revelation.
Just going along those, I know Jacques Ellul is important to you,
Yeah.
and I mean,
Okay.
just that book, Meaning of the City.
Right.
That's the name of it, right? I'm pretty
Yes.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That was operating in the background, but I wasn't
yeah.
sure to
I
bring it
heard
up.
it.
Yeah.
I heard
Okay.
it there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Good.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a really illuminating book for me too when I read it. Just the way that Ellul highlights just this deep suspicion in the Bible to like civilizational cities,
Yeah.
which is there in the story,
Yep.
and them being the source of all sorts of injustices, production of migration, difficult for survival. Yeah, so I hear that. That is the truth. That's the truth. Yep.
There's a chapter in the book East of Eden by John Steinbeck that talks about the difference between the city and the country.
Oh, what does he say? I
He
think I read that
says,
in high school, but I forgot. I
yeah.
forgot.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty heavy book to read in high school. Like,
Well, this is why
great.
I don't remember it, because
Yeah,
I read
yeah,
it too
yeah, yeah.
young.
That's the kind that you read later in life where you
Yeah.
can really, savor it. But he says something like, man stays in the country to farm and goes to the city for the whorehouse. And
Yeah.
but he has this whole thing, and this is why it's on topic, I think. But then he starts talking about, like, the church and the farm is in the country, and then like the whorehouse and gambling, all that's in the city. But then he starts talking about the churches in the country, and he starts actually comparing like the city and its vices, and he actually starts comparing like the way in which the church functions and the way in which the whorehouse functions, and it's so uncomfortable. But
Mm,
the thing is, the more you read it, the more you're like, he's right.
mm,
And I think this speaks to what you're confronting in your book, and the work that you're doing is to say, okay, so there are Christians who get this, right? What we're talking about. But there's also a lot who don't view this as not something that, oh, it's just for, a special group of people who are called to care about migrants. Actually, we are described, yes, as an elect and chosen people who are sojourners and strangers on earth. So there's some people who are like, well, this is a special calling of a few. They're missing the point. But then there are people that we're going to church with that are anti-migrant altogether and voting for leaders who are spouting rhetoric and installing policies that are just flat out anti-migrant and doing violence in the name of that. So that's kind of where it
mhm.
connects, is like, this is who we are. We say that these scriptures are authoritative for our faith in our life, and yet we've lost the plot.
Mm,
And it
yeah.
seems like, you're addressing those tensions in real time in your book.
Yeah. What you're also saying there about the few who are called to compassion, or I can't remember exactly how you
Yeah.
said it, but that feels that I hear this a lot. It's so interesting. Like a few times in terms of interviews for this, book, even from like, very conservative evangelical Christians, the appreciation of it, but also this like, you're such a compassionate person. You really care. How does that work when you meet the real world where, it's kind of just like, red and tooth and nail and claw, whatever that Darwinian, it's like
Yeah.
social domination, survival by any means. Like, like it's two different things. Like, okay, we have our Christian ethics, which is about compassion, which we live out when we can. But then we're stuck in this real world where Stephen Miller, who says, hey, the world is run by power, grow up, like it's
Mhm.
this Nietzschean will to power. Laws come later. The writers of history, the writers of the law are those who win, who dominate. And that just sounds so scary to me, and so anti-Christian, because we worship and follow a God in Jesus Christ who was killed, by the empire, because he embodied this compassion, this love that defied any kind of boundaries and any kind of um, demands. It was just he lived out God's grace. This line from one of my favorite preacher theologians, Herbert McCabe. He's a British Dominican. Oh, sorry, he is not British. He's very clear about it. He's Irish. Sorry.
Yeah.
He's very clear about
Okay,
this.
yeah. So I lived in Scotland for 4 years, and I shared an office with multiple guys. I've actually had some of my old office mates on the show before, but one of them is from Dublin, and yeah, like, he's from Ireland, he's not from the UK. And same with the Scottish, though. When they'd hear me talk, they'd be like, oh, you're from the States. And I'd be like, I'm no, from Canada. And they'd be like, I'm so sorry. Like, because for a lot of Scottish people, it's like, oh, you're British. They're like, no, we are not British.
Yes.
We are Scottish first. But then some Scots are like, we're British. It's complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got to take that seriously. McCabe, Irish Dominican preacher. And he said, what we see in Jesus is a life that is fully human, which means fully conducts God's grace and love. And what happens when that kind of life lives in the world is we kill it. It's like what happened. The human being is revealed in Jesus Christ, who lives as a human being should live, which is full, abounding with God's love and grace. And when that happens in the world, we kill it. And so it's just that, we don't want to be on the side of the people doing the killing. We want to be on the side of the people with Jesus. Like that's the Christian like dilemma. That's the Christian discernment. It's like, what does it mean to be, the United States, where I am, where, luckily you are not, is the empire. Well, I should say at this point is a waning empire. What does it mean for me to be a citizen of this empire? And I don't want to be on the side of the empire that kills people. You know what I mean? Like I want to be on the other side. I want to be on the Jesus side. And this book is a way of saying like, hey, look, this is what it looks like as we're trying to live out in fits and starts, full of all of our problems. We're trying to live on the Jesus side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I think the call, right? And that can be viewed as naive, unrealistic, foolish, weak, but that is the paradoxical power of Jesus. And what it means to be Christian is what the world calls weak is actually strong, right? What the world calls folly is actually the wisdom of God, and it brings the powers and the so-called wisdom of the world to shame. It would just be amazing, Isaac, if more Christians in America could see that.
I know we are the problem,
right? We
so
are.
I think of that. Well, not we. I mean, you're up in Canada, so you got a little bit of an out here. But I think of that Taylor Swift song where she's just like, hi, I'm the problem, it's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Like
I
that
sing
is
that sometimes to my family.
oh.
But no, I've said this before and I'll say it again. You know, as a Canadian, I can always play the, it's better here, right? Or I can play the judgment card. And I don't want anybody to believe the lie that Canada is a perfect place.
Right.
And one of the things that I observe happening is the ideology that's exported from the States is being received in Canada. Like there are people who are buying into the types of ideologies and politics and so on that you're describing, but there's also stuff here that's homegrown. And Canada never left the Commonwealth, and we were the place that people came from the States to escape slavery. But if you look at our history of colonization of indigenous peoples, right, and the harm that was done, our history isn't perfect and our present
Mhm.
isn't perfect. And I think one of the realities that we're dealing with on the global scene is like there is a movement towards nationalism and stronger borders among even the more moderate countries, because this is the world we're in now. Like if you look at, our Prime Minister Carney's speech that just made waves, right? There were aspects of his speech that I thought were spot on, but once you got to the policy part, where he's actually talking about where Canada needs to be, you're like, gosh, this just sounds like neoliberalism, right?
Yeah.
Investing in fossil fuels within Canadian soil and strengthening our military. So it's like, well, it's great that he's standing up to a bully, but actually on the practical level, it's like, well, even the middle powers need to be like this a little bit too, but maybe the Diet Coke version. So this is my way of saying,
Mhm.
like, I hear that because I know things are pretty pretty bad right now where you are, but also just to sort of practice critical realism within my own context and say, what's the good and the bad where I am too, and just
Mhm.
not allowing myself as a Canadian to just sort of get out of jail free card, right? Because there's always
Yeah.
the comparison game is always going to make you feel better in some case and worse in others. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I mean, what you're saying about the nationalism, the resurgence of nationalism has been a part of the scene for a long time now, but like the resurgence of nationalism across the globe and what it means for creating states or enforcing states against the boundaries of states against immigrants. I mean, that's the world we're living in. Yeah, and it's bad. I mean, just
yeah, it
yeah,
is.
at the end of the book, I end with all of this migration stuff and climate crisis, and point out, I mean, via other scholars, about how the U.S. has been planning. Back when climate deniers claimed to be in power. In public they were denying climate change and all that, but behind closed doors, the Pentagon, when all these senators and Congress people were meeting with the Pentagon, they were planning for scenarios of what happens when sea levels rise. And what that means is, um, most of the world population lives on coasts. And the most densely populated, most densely populated coasts are in Africa and South America. And what it means is like some of those cities are going to become more and more uninhabitable, and those people are going to be forced into migration. And you know what? The U.S. says behind closed doors, we don't want them here. And so the image that Christian Parenti uh, uses in his book called Tropics of Chaos is the US becoming an armed lifeboat. It's kind of like Noah's Ark, but instead of doves being sent out, it's like surveillance drones and infrastructure, these technologies like heat sensors, just to make sure that all these people, they don't come here. So, and it's all because of, nationalism, that like this country the United States was founded as a, European ethnic settler state, and those people don't want to lose it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great and harrowing description of like the sort of outside the borders, but even within the borders too. You're like, how do you think this is going to go, lads and ladies? Because I always say, like, the minute that all the tech billionaires in Silicon Valley are investing in like state of the art bunkers with food and water and all those sorts of things, like that's telling us something about where all this is going, despite, what we're sold through marketing and rhetoric and so on. Hey folks, I just want to jump in quickly before we get back to the show. If you've been listening to Personalist Manifestos for a while, here are a few ways that you can help us out, because we don't run paid ads, and a lot of the money that goes into this show is out of pocket. You can tell people about Personalist Manifestos. Tell people offline and online about the show. You can like and repost our posts. You can add us to your recommended reading, listening, watching lists. You can leave reviews and rate us. You can pray for us if you're the praying type. You can suggest people to interview, topics to cover, work to feature, that sort of thing. And you can support financially with either a monthly subscription, a yearly gift, or a one-time donation through Substack. I did the math, and if everybody who is currently following this show on Substack gave $1 a month, that would be enough for this show to break even. And that's the financial goal. Don't want to make money, just want to break even, so I can keep doing what I'm doing here. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show. This was a question that I wanted to ask you, because you talk about in the book, like, this isn't just a recent development, and you're touching on that there too, like in what you described with these meetings at the Pentagon. Like, this isn't recent. This isn't a total anomaly, and this isn't just a right-wing or extreme right-wing thing. Like, this goes further back than most people would like to admit. And it's a phenomenon that we see touching right, left, and center.
Mm-hmm.
So can you share about where you kind of locate this? With Bill Clinton, you make the point that, like, what Bill Clinton is talking about in his speeches is essentially a version of what Trump is talking about and trying to do. And then even the Obama administration's policies, and how none of those things were good for migrants.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a passage there. Yeah. In the book, maybe this is what you're referring to, where I, say, like, I kind of give some speeches from Clinton. So Clinton in the 1990s, 1994, under his administration, they came up with the current border enforcement policy, which is known as prevention through deterrence, which is building enforcement infrastructure along the border where there are twin cities. So, these cities that were not twin cities, they were like one city back, since forever until the border happened. So like a San Diego and Tijuana would be one example, or in Arizona, Nogales. They actually named the same city.
Oh,
and then
wow.
the border, cuts through the cities. And so during the Clinton administration, they decided to build walls there at these cities because that's where most people were crossing. And they figured that if they build those walls, it means that people would be forced into what the policy statement calls more hostile terrain, which is areas in the desert, in the Sonoran Desert, where, like, it's really dangerous and you will die. And so they thought that forcing people to migrate into more hostile terrain would mean that people would see that, like, it's dangerous and you die, so that you won't do it anymore. Well, people are desperate for all sorts of reasons, and so they continue to cross and they die. So that's during Clinton. So and I cite one of his speeches where, it just sounds so bad, and then I put another speech with Trump where, like, he sounds so bad, and I'm just like, Clinton sounds like Trump, and then I'm like, maybe actually Trump is just the fulfillment of Clinton's vision. It's Trump who's Clintonian. sidebar here, like, oh my gosh, like finally, like Bill Clinton, like he's in the Epstein files. Like, let's just like let them all burn, like get everything out. Like, I don't care. Like, I was so proud of the Democrats of finally saying, like, hey, look, we're gonna tell you, we're gonna hold you in contempt. The Hakeem Jeffries, I don't know how much you follow US politics, but basically Hakeem Jeffries, who's the leader of the Democrats in the House, said, like, hey, look, everybody, let's not hold Bill Clinton in contempt for not testifying. And they were just like, all the Congress people are like, screw that. We're holding, like, that was like a moment of, anyhow, Clinton. I have nothing good to say about that guy. But I mean, so yeah, we can see it there in 1994 with Clinton. But I trace back this stuff all the way to, the 18th century, where in New York City, what was this, like the early 1700s, I don't know, maybe like 1710, 20, around there. They were very worried about freed slaves roaming around. And they thought to themselves, these are the white people who are with power. They're like, you know what? If you're black, you should be under your master's care. And if you're not, you're probably up to no good. Same thing with indigenous people. It's both
Mm-hmm.
black people, indigenous people, and another category that they called mulattoes at the time. And so what they came up with was an early form of documentation, where they said, that those people of color who are out and about, that they have authorization to be out and about, and they're not like escaped slaves, if they're carrying around a lantern. So it's called the lantern laws. So these people, if they're carrying a lantern, it means like, they're out, they're about their master's business. But yeah, so I mean, it's it's like all the way back then. It's like the European ethnic groups that run this country are super worried about people of color having freedom of movement.
Yeah,
which is the same thing we see today. I mean, anyhow. So yeah, like you're saying, hopefully I show that this is not just a problem. I mean, it is a problem right now, but like it runs through the founding of this country.
Yeah, it reminds me of another thinker that I engage with a lot, Paul Virilio. He constantly quotes Hannah Arendt, who says, terror is the law of movement.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, but it's the control of movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can control the flows of traffic, as it were, you're basically, in power, like, right? So the way who controls the movement shows you who's in power and who isn't. So just let's go back to that sidebar.
Wait, can I say one thing real quick about
go ahead?
Just about this lantern law, just to say like where this book come from. So, that I hopefully like this book, like I'm bringing people along and learning, like showing what I'm learning along the way. I don't mean it to be like here, I figured this out. Let me tell you how you should think about things. It's me like learning as I experience this world and being involved as a pastor and then immigrant justice movement work. So like that insight about the lantern laws, that happened because I was with my friend, Jose, and we were part of an ICE rapid response team. And we were, this is when ICE was coming into our area. And there were reports that there was ICE in this Latino neighborhood. And so Jose and I were driving there. And Jose was just like, hey, you know what? I just read this book by Simone Brown called Dark Matters on the Surveillance of Blackness. And Jose was like, it is about this. It is about the way that like the policing mechanism of the state has always been super concerned about people of color and their freedom of movement. And I was like, oh, wow, that's super important. So I checked out the book and read it. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, that is exactly the moment. So I introduced that into the book as a way of describing, like what I don't make that explicit in the book, that I actually learned that fact by being on an ICE rapid response watching network. But it's, so that's part of the life that hopefully this book is trying to live in the world.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I didn't get to that question yet, but talking about the form that the book takes, and I feel like that prompts that piece, and then we can go to those other points. But yeah, that the book kind of reads like a theological memoir, but also an
Mm,
exercise in prophetic theology and like pastoral care. And I don't get the sense of, this is Isaac telling everybody, I'm right and I learned this all myself. It's important the book takes the form that it does, because you're saying like, okay, so we started with this thing of like, well, I just saw it as evident that this is what it meant to be a disciple and this is what it meant to be the church. Started pastoring at a church, started getting into this. The more we got into this, the more it asked of me, the more it asked of me, the more I pursued it, the more I started forming relationships with people, the more I started actually advocating for people in need, the more I started advocating for people in need, the more I learned. And that's the power of friendship, right?
exactly. Yes.
That like, the work that I do as an academic is so tied to friendship and the communities that I'm drawn to as a disciple. And those communities are often like the communities that the rest of the world are like, why would you spend time there? And it's like, because Jesus says he's there. And if
Right.
I go to where Jesus is and I spend time with other people who are there, they're going to tell me some really amazing things. And then I share that with people as I'm seeing those things, and that's what it's all about. So yes, your book really takes on that character. Not that you're saying, well, like, my friend told me about this, right? But like, it would make sense that those types of interactions, if you just putting one foot in front of the other, following the Spirit to where the Spirit is leading, is going to yield insights like that.
Yeah. No, that's a really helpful way of putting it, actually, the way that, I mean, that does describe my process as if I knew what I was doing.
Just
but,
show up.
but yeah,
That's all you do. This is what I
yeah,
tell people. This is what somebody told me once.
right. Yeah, just
70%
show,
of
yeah,
success in life is showing up. The other 30% is hard work. And then, don't be a jerk. Like, just that's
that's
literally
it.
like, and God is with you every step of the way.
Right.
Right. And it hasn't let me down yet.
Yeah.
I'm still alive, talking to you. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but in terms of like this just showing up is exactly what the book is. And maybe the reason why, a bunch of people are doing good work and important work, God's work out there showing up, and they don't write a book about it, like,
Yeah.
and I think maybe the reason why the book happened for me is like I was showing up and I was also preaching every Sunday. And what that means is like, I mean, I don't know what it means for me. I don't know. I can't speak for other preachers out there, but like my sermon is processing what's going on in my life and my week as I'm reading the scriptures, like I'm assigned these scriptures. I am tasked with having something to say about the gospel for a community this week, and I am formed by what's going on in the life of our community, what's going on in the streets, and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of the book is stories and insights from sermons over, a decade or plus that I figured out were part of the same theme, and came together as a book. So yeah, like it really is the result of the preaching life
Oh, I love that.
as a community, and being involved in community organizing.
Yeah, I love that. No, I mean, I don't preach a ton, but when I do um get invited to, I love that. I mean, teaching for me as well,
Yeah,
right?
same
Like,
thing. Yep.
but yeah, I mean, one way to frame it is lived theology. And
Right.
sometimes that is, qualitative quantitative research. More obviously, and other times like the quantitative qualitative research is the conversation you have in a car with somebody that you are doing ministry with, and right in intense moments. But going back to the sidebar, and a few questions I had orbiting around that sort of discussion piece was, yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, well, I mean, the evidence is there, but are people really seeing it is just how bad it is and just how widespread the corruption is. Like, there was the Clinton, right, photos, and then the ones that really got me is like a few of those you're like, yeah, okay, that's obvious, right? Like we all knew, and now there's just like proof of it. And some people aren't willing to admit it, but like, let's be real. It's not. I wasn't surprised that Clinton was.
Yes, I
It's
was not
like it was
surprised at
on the
all.
label, right? Does anybody remember a court case? The one that was like a gut punch for me was the photo of Noam Chomsky with Epstein
Mm,
on a plane. And how people have tried to explain that away. People on the left have tried to explain that away of like, oh, he didn't know that, Epstein was, as bad as he was. And it was just like, I mean, it's like, no, like his nonverbals and like the fact that he's on Epstein's private jet or whatever suggests that there was a level of familiarity. And are you going to really tell me that one of the foremost intellectuals had who made a name for himself speaking truth to power had no idea who this dude was? Come on.
yeah, I mean,
Really?
right, no, I agree with you. First, when there was just like, oh, there's emails, I'm just like, okay, fine. Like he responds to an email from Epstein,
Yeah. What's
like,
the nature of the email? It's
yeah,
like, you could literally
right.
say, I don't want to work with you because X, Y, and Z.
But
Yeah.
then when the picture when he's on the plane, I was just like, oh man, that's bad news.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
Chomsky's always been. I mean, I have to say, like, um, I read Chomsky early on, and it was important to me in terms of like understanding this empire that we're a part. And he just goes after the U.S. empire, and that's helpful. But also, like, I don't know. I guess I stopped reading him partly because he feels like he's all over the place. Like, I don't know. All that to say, let me just say it this way. I can live without Noam Chomsky. Like, we have other people that name that stuff. But in terms of like the what counts as like the Democratic left, like the way that Democrats have rallied around the Clintons, I'm just like, this has been a problem since forever. Like, give this up. This is not this family has held us back as a country. I mean, I'm a Bernie bro,
Yeah.
Tio Bernie, we called him. Like
Mhm.
that's where I am. And yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I mean, I think what explains, at least in part, why people are willing to vote for apparent outsiders who promise to drain the swamp and do it in a very, efficient and drastic way is because people are tired of being betrayed,
yeah,
right?
right.
And so I don't think it makes it right, but I can exercise my empathy and compassion to say, well, the party that said that it cared about working class people repeatedly, and migrants and plays the identity politics card all the time,
Yeah,
repeatedly proves that they actually don't.
right.
And so at what point you're like, well, I'm willing to try something else,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
So now I want to talk a little bit about um, the increasing militarization of border enforcement, and you talked about the so-called tactic of deterrence, but you do describe, your time spent actually in the borderlands, uh, and just how brutal it can be. And so for those who just aren't aware, can you describe some of what's going on there and just how militarized things have become so people kind of have a sense of the scale of this?
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up in that area, Southern California, and then Southern Arizona. And when we moved to Tucson, my I saw a family that lived in San Diego, like outside of south of San Diego. And so we would drive back and forth for holidays, Christmas and stuff like that along Interstate 8 is the interstate that runs from Tucson to San Diego. And it basically, in a few places, it goes right along the border. So growing up, we never knew it was on the border, like the border was there unless you looked on the map. Like you don't see that we didn't see the border as we drove. I mean, I just made that same drive right after like I don't know, 2022, I guess it was. And now you make that drive and you see the border wall, like in stretches of area that's just completely desolate. It's just sand dunes. It looks like, the beach for the ocean without the ocean. It's just sand everywhere. But there's big cities nearby, and so now that infrastructure is moving into these rural desert areas because it's like maybe, I don't know, 5-10 miles from a city. So it might be walkable. But now there's even borders. So it's just like the infrastructure itself has transformed the environment. I mean, this is called, the built environment. This is what we have now. And, we worry about human beings. Like I'm kind of partial to human beings, but there's
Me
also
too.
lots of, but there's also lots of concerns about other kinds of animals, and, disrupting the flows of migration patterns of all sorts of, coyotes, deer, whatever it might be, rabbits, jackrabbits, these huge rabbits. So yeah, it's just really disrupting the whole ecosystem of the place and transforming it into what looks like an extended military installation. Um, I call it a war against migrants in the book, and I mean I maybe am trying to be a little provocative there. It's not a declared war. Well, I mean, the U.S. is invading Venezuela without declaring war anyway. So, like, what does it mean to declare war? But what I'm trying to do in the book is to display that instead of, following like what the U.S. says it's doing, like, oh no, we want to welcome migrants, labor, blah, 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 just to see actually what the infrastructure says, like to read the material constructions and say, like, what does this say? And some of the earliest parts of that wall, built in the mid 1990s in San Diego, were repurposed military landing pads for the Vietnam War. So like it's military infrastructure that's being repurposed to make the border wall the border wall. Same thing in terms of the Japanese internment camps. It's repurposed fencing from those camps that the military saved and are now using or have been using for making that wall a wall. So I just, like follow the infrastructure, follow the personnel, and it looks like this is a militarization. It looks like warfare. When was this? Okay, maybe it was 2016. 2016, I was part of a Mennonite Church USA. I was on our denominational board, and I was part of a delegation that went to Israel, Palestine to kind of work with our partner humanitarian organizations, church organizations there. And while I was there in Bethlehem, when we were in Ida camp, which is a refugee camp of Palestinians that's up against the partition wall, separation wall with the state of Israel. And, it's this massive wall. You see soldiers, Israeli soldiers up there with their guns looking at you. And all these surveillance technologies, huge, huge platforms with video cameras, sensors of all kinds, infrared sensors. While I was there in Ida camp, I just looked at the news on my phone, and Obama, who was president at the time, signed some multi-billion-dollar contract with Elbit Systems. Elbit Systems is an Israeli defense contractor that's responsible for all that kind of surveillance infrastructure in the state of Israel, and also, as it borders against like Gaza and the occupied territories. Obama signs a contract with that same system, the Elbit Systems, to bring some of that to the U.S.-Mexico border. So it's Elbit Systems that has made this infrastructure. So it's just wild to me to see like the way that these defense contractors are deployed in these horrible conditions, what they've created in occupied territories in Palestine, now is what we want here in the United States at the border. Absolutely. And it was Obama. Obama signed that contract.
Yeah. Yeah. Just as I listen to you talk, it reminds me of the apparent connections between, the early 2000s global war on terror with the declared war on migrants. There's a book that I read by Jeremy Scahill, I believe it's called Dirty Wars.
Okay.
And he talks about, I can't remember who it was. It's been a while since I've read the book, but somebody very high up in the American military basically said, now the whole world's a battlefield.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so if you look at the rhetoric in terms of why borders need to be more militarized, well, the language of terror creeps in. So,
Yeah.
oftentimes it's gangs, right? Or drugs, right? Murderers and rapists and so forth. But well, also too, the possibility of letting in terrorists, right? And the other piece as well is Virilio talks about endocolonization. And just practically speaking, it's like you spend all this money on weapons and defense technologies and so forth to go overseas and engage in wars, either proxy wars or real ones, and you have this surplus. And what do you do with that surplus? Well, you sell it to other people who want it, or you take it home and you sell it to your police and your
Right.
border guards, right? Or you just give them all these, they're not like the most up to date, vehicles and weapons and sensors. It was like, well, but it's pretty good. So we can actually give this to, our police and, border patrols and so forth. And so basically the idea is that the imperial tactics and colonization and war that takes place overseas, at a certain point, it follows you home and you start doing the same things on your citizens and the people just in your vicinity. But some of the examples you give are more, I don't want to say, let's say particular, but you talk about, there are people who leave water in the desert and sort of medical supplies and these sorts of things. And then you have people going out and destroying them, right?
Yeah.
And that is such a particular example, but I feel like it concretizes sometimes the abstract stuff that we're talking about here in a very real way. And also the work that you do in honoring people who are unidentified and the importance of visibility to what you're doing, like the amount of people who die and there's no way of identifying them. And yet you and others take time to still honor them and have visible markers to remember them. Those, I think, are helpful ways to concretize, here's this scale of the loss and the violence, and here's how we're responding to that in a meaningful theological, and I think you use the language of sacred way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yes. Yeah. I mean, for your first point about, people putting out like this Tucson Samaritans putting water out, doing water drops and then people coming and destroying that water. I mean, so it's, there's some people who are they're called the Minutemen. It's like a militia movement that they've decided that they're going to patrol the border. These are just like ordinary people with guns who go out and patrol the border. And then they call the CBP, the Border Patrol, and say, hey, look, we have a sighting of a group crossing the border over here. Here's the coordinates. But there's also people, and this is what Francisco Cantu, in his book called The Line Becomes a River, I think is the name of the book. But he was a Border Patrol agent and talks about some of the stuff that they did. And he was just like, it's not just the militiamen out there, these Minutemen, it's like Border Patrol agents. He's like, I punctured these water containers. This is what we did. So it's not, it's like, it's state violence as well. It's not like random people. It's also state violence. So that it's just, the horror of wanting people to die in the desert. Anyhow, but yeah, and then there's other folks like you're talking about people who've gone out and honor people where people have died crossing the border. So Alvaro Enciso is a story. I tell his story. He's a Colombian immigrant, lives in Tucson, Arizona. He's an artist, and his devotional practice is every Tuesday. He's been doing this for decades. Every Tuesday, he goes out and plants a cross that he made in his studio on the site where somebody has died. So there's a map online that the University of Arizona and the coroner's office, the public examiner, they give GPS coordinates for every place that someone's remains were found. So he uses that to go to the exact spot. And then these crosses that Alvaro designed in his art studio, are from found objects. So it's stuff that he's found in the desert that people have left behind while crossing. So, backpack, a wallet with photos in it, glass, rubber from a shoe, rosary beads, whatever it might be, he finds on the migrant trails, and he takes that to his studio and uses those found objects for his crosses, which he considers a kind of relic that the cross remembers stories that we'll never know. And they tell stories we will never understand the meaning of, but it's important for him to go out there and memorialize these lives. I find his witness just completely powerful. I mean, he does this every week. I just talked to him the other day on the phone, and he's getting old, but he's committed to this.
And how many? I remember you mentioning how many he said that he thinks he's done.
Yeah, I want to say it was something like, at the time I wrote the book, it was like upper 2000s, maybe almost 3,000 crosses he's put out. He's able to put anywhere between like 3 to 5 crosses every day, every Tuesday, and he's been doing this for, I think, since the early 2000s. But yeah, his joke. So in the database, there's something like 4,500 sites where people's remains were found. And so Alvaro's joke is, it's like, well, I'll be doing this until I'm 127 years old. Then I'll complete. Because for him, and he's like, obviously that assumes that no one else is added to the database, which happens, every month. But he thinks of his work as a giant installation project. It's called Donde Mueren los Sueños, so where dreams die. So for him, he came here for the American dream, and he says he can't help but think of all those people for whom the dream has died with their expired breath, and he wants to memorialize them. So this is his installation project, which he says are for the rattlesnakes and the roadrunners, and hopefully God looks as well in this huge gallery called the Sonoran Desert.
I reckon God does.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a beautiful and, I would say, prophetic act to make visible what the average person would rather just stay invisible, consciously or unconsciously. Like it's not nice to think about if you can avoid it, and some people can't avoid it. But if you can avoid it, it's not nice to think about 4,500, plus people who die in the desert because of, thirst or whatever, right? But again, we talk about the Christian story, right? Like Jesus is pretty clear. Like everything that's said in secret is going to be shouted from the rooftops.
Yeah,
everything done in the dark is going to come to light.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so just wait. It's only a matter of time. And I was thinking about this the other day of in Revelation, it talks about like the kings of the nations when they bring their stuff into the new heavens and the new earth. And I was talking with students like, what do you think we're going to bring in? Because also in Revelation, it talks about like Babylon and the merchants and the artists and the slave trade. And all of a sudden it's like, the prophecy there is like all of that is being brought down in an hour, 1 hour. So if all of that stuff that, the average human would be like, well, that's what's getting into the new heavens and the new earth, all that's torn down because of the violence, the exploitation, right? The idolatry that produced all of that, right? The products of mammon. If that's not getting in, what are the kings bringing in? And I'm like, I feel like those types of projects are what kings are going to bring in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to be like, thus saith the Lord, but I'm pretty sure in terms of the way, I think I'm standing on kind of solid ground there. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, those are the things everyone's bringing. Yeah, that kind of truth telling.
I hope so.
Yeah, and that, artistic cultural production that tells the truth, inconvenient truth. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the other part of that story that I appreciate so much, the end of the book of Revelation when, the nations, the kings of the nations are coming in. It's, I mean, like, I understand we don't want to read legislation, politics straight from the Bible, like this is that. Sometimes I don't know, but that story is so wild to me because it's the heavenly city, which comes down from heaven. I don't know. N.T. Wright has made a career, pointing out this fact over and over again. Like,
and you know what? He can't make that point enough. Honestly, like,
gosh.
If you're going to make one point, telling people that the earth is not going to burn, so don't worry about caring for it. That's a pretty good point to make.
It is a good point. It is a good point.
Yeah.
So the heavenly city comes down, and John the seer, he describes the beauty of the city, and then he goes on for verse after verse about the wall. It's almost like, this is, you think your walls are good down here. Let me tell you about this wall in the heavenly city and, how wide it is, how tall it is, what it's made, the materials. And like, as you read, you're just like, oh, wow, this is quite a big ass wall. And then it says, then there will be 12 gates and the gates will never be shut.
Yep.
And it's like, wait a minute here. You got this big wall and then you got these gates, you got 12 gates. And I mean, the whole point of a gate is like, sometimes you got to shut them, but it's like, no, this is a city. And then it says, so that the nations can come and go.
Yeah.
It's like people coming. This is like a migratory center. It's not policing these borders. It's saying like, hey, we've created a permeable city.
Yeah. 100%. I may have talked about it on the show, but I have students who could tell you that that's also part of my mini sermon on that passage. Is I think that's just such like Hebrew irony there, and like prophetic and true and beautiful, but also just like, hey, we're just gonna have an eternal reminder that walls and gates are dumb.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right? Like, like we're just gonna have it here to remind you that there was a time we had these, and these had guards with guns and the sensors and whatever. But we're gonna have now, it's gonna have some sweet jewels. But also the gates, like they're just gonna, it's just right. And I do think, right, the wilderness, right, is what surrounds it, and the garden city is the epicenter. And feel free to come in, right, and go as you please.
Yep.
So just two more questions here. I want to talk about food and the significance of food throughout the book. It connects to the stories that you tell, but also you read those theologically. So I want to talk about food, and then I want to talk about sanctuary. But yeah, tell me a little bit about the role that food plays in the stories you tell, which connect to ministry you've done, but also how you connect that to Eucharist and the importance of like the sacraments within the Christian life.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not realize until after, and still talking to people, kind people who want to talk to me about the book like you, that basically food is a subplot of the book. Like I didn't even think about it as I was writing it, but then as people pointed out, I'm just like, oh yeah, maybe I'm just always hungry, so food's always on my mind. Or it's like, I am like the stereotypical Latino theologian who writes about food. I mean, this is what Latinos do. We write about food. Ever since Esasi Diaz, important Mujerista theologian, really like took seriously like the domestic arts as central to Latino life. And we all, I mean, not we all, I have had, she's now passed away, a grandmother who like always made food for us. Arroz con pollo was like always there on the stove. And like that has shaped my understanding of like what it means to welcome people into a home and to feed them, and what it means to build community around a table, um, and what it means to be part of the kingdom of God, where, we're promised this heavenly banquet, which we celebrate now at the communion table. So yeah, so I think that our celebrations, the way the food stories kind of work in the book, gestures to a kind of hope where we will all find one another around the same table, no matter where we came from, no matter where we're going, and that it's God's table. God makes room for us.
Yeah.
That God is the host. Um, yeah, yeah. So that's the food is there. I mean, I talk about my grandmother and the heavenly banquet promised in Isaiah as a way of thinking through what she was offering us, and always making room for whoever we brought over, and that table became a working out of what Sasadiyas calls the kingdom. We become each other's kin around the table. So, my cousins and I would bring our friends, and you know what? They became my my grandmother's extended family, and that's what we are about as the church. Saw the same sort of thing in the migrant shelter in Tijuana. I was there volunteering and shared stories in the book about what it means to be there and like work in the kitchen. And Miguel, the community chef there, his commitment to make like good tasting food for anybody who needed it, who's staying there at the shelter, is a witness. It's one thing to think about food as like just completely utilitarian, like we need to eat in order to survive. But Miguel is just like, no, 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 food has to taste good. I'm going to give these people food that is just going to blow their minds, and all from like donated items to the shelter. And he was just like a genius at turning this food into like delicacies.
Oh, I mean, we could probably do a whole other hour talking about this stuff. I think about this a lot, and what you describe reminds me a lot of what it was like with my Nona, and very similar kind of approach within the from my dad is from Southeast Italy. They immigrated when he was one, and they immigrated after the war in like Southeast Italy, coming out of like post. It was
Wow.
bad, right?
Yeah.
So, but that actually, like, there was always food and there was always room at the table. And what I think is so interesting about Italian cuisine is like Italian cuisine is, like very few people are like, not for me, right? You're like, like let's go for Italian, right? But the thing about Italian food is it's so simple,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Like it's just tomato sauce, like, and then if you have some meat, you throw it in there, and then some pasta. But you're like, it's so simple, and you're like, I wonder if there's a history of this in terms of like, I wonder if this was actually born out of scarcity, right? Like, it's just a big stew, and then you put it on noodles, and it's amazing. But like, you can feed a big family with that.
Yeah.
And I also think too about there is food that sort of just like objectively tastes good, but then there are meals that are memorable and the food tasted amazing, but it's the people that you were with and the environment that you with that does something to it as well. And I think that that is also the piece of it as well, of just like the magic of eating together,
Yeah.
and how communion, when the church receives communion, is a reminder, a disclosure, a revelation of the magic of eating together. And hopefully that's forming us to be the type of people who do that throughout the day. And there's the other story that you told about the inmates that you connected with that would, save up money to buy Doritos to crush them up to make flour. And they would cook these Dorito flour things in like trash bags and fill them with processed meat. And on the one hand, it's like, this is like does not sound appealing. And they're like, but literally the cost was so high to do it, but like it's literally what got us through the year.
Yeah.
Like just looking forward to it. That was a North Star and a magical one in such a difficult situation. And
I'll never forget his line. He said, those tamales taste like freedom.
yeah, yes. And I've done prison ministry. Actually, I'm working on a book, and one of the final chapters will be about being in prison ministry, and the working title is just Coffee and Cookies.
I love it. Love it.
That you can't bring much into, prisons. But the amount of guys that would not otherwise come, to talk about Jesus, if we didn't have Oreos and coffee, they're not coming. But I'm like, we never, like, now we're doing communion. But you best believe that the Spirit is at work in such a way that, like, maybe the words of institution aren't spoken, but there's like a Eucharistic draw there, right? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, it doesn't have to be something amazing. It's the taste of freedom, though, in the midst of a place that seems like is the opposite of freedom.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that's exactly, yeah, that was that prison scene you're talking about was in Eloy Detention Center in Arizona, which is a core civic facility. It's a private prison. Like all prisons are pretty bad, but like private prisons are even worse because they don't have federal supervision. And yeah, the whole system, the whole prison daily life is designed so that people can't bear it anymore. So they will what's called self-deport. Because these are all people who have a court date, but they've been arrested, so they have to remain in prison until their court date, which is going to be, months, sometimes years away. And so they make life miserable so that people will, self-deport. But yeah, he was telling me, like, the things that get us through is our friends and family on the outside. They send us money. We put on our commissary. They put money on our commissary. And then every Christmas, we make tamales because a lot of Latino households make tamales to celebrate Christmas. And yeah, he just kind of walked through what it was like to make, I think it's in the book, it's 12 tamales for $80, because everything's overpriced, marked up in prisons. It's a racket. But yeah, $80 to make these tamales. But yeah, that's what freedom tastes like. That's what survival, the group of people getting together, pooling their resources to taste or remind themselves what the outside feels like.
That's wonderful. So yeah, just the last question. I want to talk about sanctuary, and then just, related to that, people are listening who are like, okay, I'm convinced, or I've already been convinced, but like, what can I do? Because it feels like such a politicized, divisive, and maybe even risky area to just like, get more involved in. And yet we've spent a lot of time talking about why this is not an option. Like, this is core to what it means to be a Christian if you identify as such. So talk about sanctuary and churches providing sanctuary, but also any other just practical suggestions you would have for people who are just interested in taking that first step.
One chapter is about sanctuary, our sanctuary work at our church, where during the first Trump administration, this person, Rosa del Carmen, lived at church. She lived on church property, and we kept her safe. She got a deportation notice, and even though she still had a court case pending, and so her attorney got a hold of us, we transformed a kind of like a office room into an apartment for her, and she lived there for 2 years. I mean, she just did not step foot off of church property. Part of the reason was, at least during the first Trump administration, ICE was honoring this memo that told them that they were not allowed to trespass into sensitive locations to conduct their operations, and sensitive locations included hospitals or medical facilities, courtrooms, schools, political demonstrations, which was always a weird category, and then places of worship. And so, yeah, that's how we were able to keep Rosa safe. And I mean, we meant reorienting the life of our church. All of a sudden, we were, going grocery shopping for her. I still remember how we thought of everything in terms of her needs. And then I get, a week or two in, I get a text from Rosa, and she's just like, "So sorry to bother you, but I'm wondering how I can do my laundry." And I was like, "Oh shit!" Like
the things laundry, you don't think about. Yeah. Yeah.
And so then we got together. Basically, what I learned being a pastor is I just organized volunteers. I got very good at Excel spreadsheets. A pastoral gift there. And so I arranged another rotation of people to, come get her laundry, take it home, do her laundry, bring it back to her, which was such the intimacies of what it meant to have her there with us. Like, it was just, I don't know, it's been a profound experience to think about how much she trusted us, with her life. Also related to food, I don't think I wrote about this, but it was also interesting because originally we had thought about, we're hosting this person at our church, extending hospitality, but then very quickly realized that, we were just there a couple times a week at church, but she was living there. So in some sense, she kind of became the host to us because she was constantly using the space, especially the big kitchen and the fellowship hall. And during church, after church, she would make food, and she'd make papusas is kind of what her staple food. And so then she was feeding us. And it was just this powerful reversal of the gospel where, we think we're the hosts and people are the guests, but those lines get divided very quick. I mean, the lines get switched. The roles get switched so quickly where she became the host and we became her guests at church.
Yeah. That's amazing. Can you hear that?
I can. Yeah. What is that?
It's a fire drill at my work. So, well, I gotta go, but we're at the conclusion anyways. Yeah. I'm just gonna be rebellious for a second here because I want to finish this episode. Yeah. I will finish this episode, this conversation, because it's so good. That what you're talking about is the type of reversals that I long for. Like I work in the area of disability ministry, and this is why I tell people you have to care. You have to get involved, and not because people need you to care for them. Yes, they need that, but there's going to be a moment or moments when all of a sudden the power dynamics invert and now you're being cared for. And then you start to see like, whoa, that's what Jesus was talking about. I am the person that you think that I am not. Right?
Oh, exactly.
Right. And I'm like, once you get a taste of that, it's a taste of the kingdom. You never want to leave. And some people just never get there because they don't want to be uncomfortable, right? But I'm like, just take the step, right? Stick your neck out and see how Jesus meets you in that. Okay, well, thank you for your book. I am sorry to rush off, but thank you for your book, your work and your witness. All the best as you work on your doctorate, and hopefully that goes well.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a joy to talk with you. Thanks again.
Yeah.